He was the kind of man who preferred corners over center stage, the kind who would rather blend into the background of a photograph than stand in front. At 34 years old, he had built a life that was quiet and predictable and safe every morning. He woke up at the same time and drove the same route to work and sat at the same desk surrounded by the same stacks of paper. He was an accountant at a mid-sized company in a building made of glass and steel. His days were filled with numbers and spreadsheets and tax forms that most people found boring, but he did not mind the silence of his work. He did not mind being invisible. In fact, he preferred it that way. His coworkers knew him as the quiet guy from the finance department, the one who always said good morning with a polite nod, but never stayed long at office parties. The one who ate lunch alone at his desk while reading news on his phone. They were not being unkind when they overlooked him. He simply never gave them a reason to notice. But there was one thing about this man that nobody at work knew, one secret he kept hidden like a treasure, locked away in a chest. Every night after his daughter went to bed, he would sit at a small electronic keyboard in the corner of his living room, would put on his headphones so the sound would not wake her, and he would play. He had never taken a single piano lesson in his life. Everything he knew came from videos he found, online tutorials that broke down famous pieces, note by note. He would pause and rewind and try again until his fingers remembered the patterns. It started about 2 years ago. When his daughter was 7, she had been watching a movie with him one evening, a family film where the father surprised everyone by playing a beautiful song at a wedding. His little girl had turned to him with wide eyes and asked if he could do that. He had laughed and told her no. He did not know how to play anything, but the look of wonder on her face stayed with him long after the movie ended. That night he searched for beginner piano lessons on his phone. He told himself it was just curiosity, just something to pass the time. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and before he realized it, playing the piano had become the most important part of his day. It was never about performing. It was never about showing anyone what he could do. It was just for him. Private world where he could escape the stress of bills and deadlines and the weight of being a single father. When his fingers moved across the keys, he felt something he could not put into words, a kind of peace that nothing else in his life could give him. Play everything from classical pieces to modern film scores. Some nights he played the same song over and over just because he loved the way it sounded. Other nights, he experimented with new melodies he had never tried before. His daughter sometimes asked him if he had learned to play yet. He always smiled and changed the subject. He was not ready to share this part of himself with anyone, not even with her. The truth was he was afraid that if he played in front of someone they would think he was not good enough, afraid that the magic he felt alone would disappear the moment another person listened. So he kept it to himself, a beautiful secret that belonged only to the quiet hours of the night. But life has a way of pulling hidden things into the light, and his moment came in a way he never expected. Every year his company hosted a big charity gala. It was the kind of fancy event where everyone dressed up in their best clothes and pretended to enjoy small talk while drinking expensive wine. The money raised went to local schools and community programs, and the company took great pride in making it a memorable evening. There was always live entertainment, usually a local band or a singer hired from an agency. But this year something went wrong. Just 3 weeks before the gala, the entertainment canceled. The band had a scheduling conflict and could not make it. The events team was in a panic. They sent out emails asking if anyone knew a musician who could fill in on short notice. They posted flyers in the break room begging for suggestions, but no one seemed to have a solution he heard about. The problem, like everyone else, through office gossip and stressed conversations in the hallway, he felt a small tug in his chest when he heard them mention piano, but he pushed it away. There was no way he could do something like that. He had never played in front of a single person. The idea of sitting on a stage in front of 200 people made his stomach turn. He went back to his desk and tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting to the keyboard waiting for him at home. He thought about how it would feel to play something beautiful for a room full of people, and then he thought about how terrifying it would be to make a mistake in front of all of them. No, it was not worth the risk. He told himself to forget about it, but fate had other plans. One afternoon, his coworker from the cubicle next to his stopped by his desk. This coworker was the opposite of him in every way, loud and cheerful and always looking for a reason to start a conversation. She had overheard him humming once, just a few notes from a classical piece he had been practicing at home. He did not even realize he was doing it, but she remembered, and now with the gala entertainment crisis reaching a breaking point, she thought of him. "Hey," she said, leaning against the edge of his desk. "I have a crazy idea." He looked up from his computer with a nervous feeling already forming in his gut. "You know how they need someone for the gala, right?" He nodded slowly. "I once heard you humming something really pretty," she grinned. "Are you secretly a musician or something?" His face turned red. "Not really, I just like music, that's all." She tilted her head like she did not believe him. "Come on, everyone has hidden talents. Can you sing, play an instrument, anything?" He hesitated for just a second. Too long, and she saw idol. "My gosh," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Can play something." "What is it?" "Piano," he admitted before he could stop himself. "But I'm not good enough to perform, I just do it at home for fun." "That is perfect," she said, already standing up straight like she had solved the biggest problem of the year. "I am telling the events team right now." "Wait," he said, reaching out as if he could physically stop. Harry said, "I'm not good enough. I have never played in front of anyone." But she was already walking away, her heels clicking on the office floor. He sat frozen in his chair, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Within an hour, the head of the events team came to his desk. She was smiling like he had just saved the entire company. Tried to explain that he was not a real pianist, that he had only been teaching himself for 2 years, that he had never performed anywhere, not even for family, but she was not listening. She kept saying how grateful she was, how this was exactly what they needed, how it would be so special to have one of their own employees share a hidden gift. Before he knew what was happening, his name was added to the program. The quiet accountant from finance was going to play piano at the company gala in front of 200 people, including the executives, including the clients, including everyone who had never noticed him before. He walked to his car that evening in a daze. His hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. What had he done? How was he going to get through this? When he got home, his daughter ran to the door to greet him like she always did. She wrapped her arms around his waist and asked about his day. He looked down at her bright eyes and felt a wave of emotion he could not explain. He thought about the reason he started learning piano in the first place. The wonder on her face when she asked if he could play like the father in that movie. He had wanted to be that father for her, had wanted to give her something magical, and now he was being pushed to do exactly that, just not in the way he ever imagined. He kneeled down and hugged her tight. Tonight was going to be different. Tonight, when he sat at his keyboard, he would not be playing just for himself anymore. He would be practicing for the most terrifying moment of his life, and he had no idea if he was ready. The days that followed felt like a slow-motion nightmare. Every morning, he woke up with a heavy weight sitting on his chest, the kind of weight that made it hard to breathe. He would lie in bed staring at the ceiling and think about what was coming. 3 weeks, that was all the time he had. 3 weeks to prepare for something he had never done in his entire life. At work, he could feel people looking at him differently. Word had spread fast through the office. The quiet guy from finance was going to perform at the gala. Some people stopped by his desk to say how excited they were. Others patted him on the back and told him they had no idea he was so talented. He smiled, nodded, and thanked them. But inside, he felt like a fraud. They thought he was some kind of hidden musical genius. They had no idea He was just a self-taught beginner who played alone in his living room. He wanted to tell them the truth. He wanted to explain that he had never performed for anyone, that the thought of sitting in front of a crowd made him feel sick, but every time he opened his mouth to say something, the words got stuck. It was easier to just smile and pretend everything was fine at home. Things were different. The moment he walked through the door, the panic would set in. He would look at his keyboard sitting in the corner and feel his heart start racing. This instrument that had brought him so much peace now felt like a source of terror. He sat down to practice every night after dinner. His daughter would do her homework at the kitchen table while he played. It was not the same as before. Before he played because he loved it. Now he played because he had to, and that changed everything. His fingers that once moved so smoothly now stumbled over notes he had played 100 times. Passages that used to feel natural suddenly felt impossible. He would make a mistake and have to start over. Then he would make another mistake and start over again. Some nights, he played the same section 20 or 30 times without getting it right. The frustration built up inside him like water behind a dam. He started doubting everything. Maybe he was not as good as he thought. Maybe the songs he played alone sounded decent only because no one else was listening. Maybe once he sat in front of a real audience, they would hear how amateur he truly was. These thoughts kept him awake at night. He would lie in the darkness and imagine all the ways things could go wrong. He pictured himself sitting at the piano and forgetting how to play. He pictured the silence of a room full of people waiting for music that never came. He pictured the embarrassment on his face and the pity in their eyes. The fear was eating him alive. During the second week, he started thinking about backing out. He sat at his desk at work and wrote an email to the events team. He explained that he had made a mistake, that he was not ready for something like this, that they should find someone else before it was too late. He read the email over and over. His finger hovered over the send button, but he could not bring himself to click it. Something inside him kept holding back. He deleted the email and closed his laptop. That night, he tried again. He wrote another message saying the same thing. This time he got even closer to sending it, but again he stopped. Did not know why. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the fear of disappointing people who were counting on him. Or maybe somewhere deep down he wanted to prove to himself that he could do this. Whatever the reason, he never sent those emails. But the anxiety did not go away. It only got worse. By the third week, he was a mess. He could barely focus at work. His co-workers noticed that he seemed distracted and tired. The cheerful woman who had volunteered him in the first place asked if he was okay. He told her he was fine, just a little nervous. She laughed and said everyone gets stage fright. She said once he started playing, he would forget all about the audience. Nodded and smiled, but he did not believe her. How could she understand? She had never felt the terror of exposing something so personal to a room full of strangers. At home, his daughter started noticing too. She was only 9 years old, but she was smart and observant. She could tell something was bothering her father. One evening, she finished her homework early and came to sit beside him. On the piano bench, he was in the middle of practicing the piece he had chosen for the gala, a beautiful slow melody that he had fallen in love with the first time he heard it, but tonight it sounded hollow and mechanical. He kept making mistakes and starting over. His jaw was tight and his shoulders were tense. She sat quietly and watched him struggle. After a few minutes, she reached over and placed her small hand on top of his. He stopped playing and looked at her, his little girl with her big brown eyes and messy ponytail. She looked up at him with a softness that made his heart ache. "Why are you so worried?" she asked. He let out a long breath. "Because I have to play this in front of a lot of people, and I am scared. I'm going to mess it up," she thought about this for a moment. Then she tilted her head and asked a question that caught him off guard. "Why do you play the piano?" He blinked. "What do you mean? I mean, why did you start learning?" He had never really told her the full story. He thought back to that night 2 years ago, the movie they watched together, the way her face lit up when she saw the father play. He had started learning because of her, because he wanted to be the kind of dad who could create something beautiful, because he wanted to give her a memory she would carry forever. He looked at her and told her the truth. I started because of you, because you once asked me if I could play like the dad in that movie, and I wanted to say yes. Her eyes widened with surprise. She had no idea she was the reason behind all those late-night practice sessions. She had no idea that every song he learned was a gift he was preparing for Hira. Small smile spread across her face. So you learned from me. He nodded. She squeezed his hand tighter. Then why are you so scared now? Because this is different. This is in front of hundreds of people. She shook her head slowly like she was the wise one, and he was the child, but you are not playing for them. She paused and looked straight into his eyes. You are playing for me? Those 5 words hit him harder than anything else anyone had said. He felt something shift inside his chest. She was right. Had lost sight of why he started in the first place. He had been so focused on the audience and the pressure and the fear of failure that he forgot. This was never about impressing strangers. It was about love. It was about showing his daughter that her father could be brave, that he could chase something even when it scared him, that he could turn a simple wish into something real. She leaned her head against his arm and spoke softly. I listen to you play sometimes. When I'm supposed to be asleep, I leave my door open a little bit so I can hear. He felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. You do, she nodded. It is the prettiest sound in the whole world. It helps me fall asleep. He had no idea all this time. He thought he was playing in secret, but she had been his audience all along, and she loved it, not because it was perfect, but because it came from him. He wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest felt a little lighter. He still did not know if he was ready for the gala. He still did not know if he could get through the performance without falling apart, but now he had something to hold on to, a reason that was bigger than his fear. He was not going to play for the executives or the clients or his coworkers. He was going to play for her, and maybe that would be enough. That night after she went to bed, he sat at his keyboard one more time. He put on his headphones and closed his eyes. He thought about his daughter lying in her room with the door cracked open, listening, waiting. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. This time, he did not think about mistakes. He did not think about the gala or the crowd or what people would say. He just played, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like it used to. It felt like peace. It felt like home. Maybe he was not the most talented pianist in the world. Maybe he would never be perfect, but he had something that mattered more than talent. He had a reason to try, and that was enough to keep going. The morning of the gala, he woke up before his alarm. He lay still in the darkness and listened to the sound of his own breathing. Today was the day. There was no more waiting, no more practicing, no more telling himself he still had time to prepare. The moment he had been dreading for 3 weeks had finally arrived. He got out of bed slowly, like a man walking toward something he could not escape. His body felt heavy, and his mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts. He went through his morning routine on autopilot, showered and got dressed, and made breakfast for his daughter. She was excited because tonight was special. He had arranged for her to come to the gala with him. His sister was going to bring her and sit with her at one of the back tables. He wanted her there because he needed an audience, but because she was his reason. If he was going to do this, he wanted her to see it. She chattered happily while eating her cereal, talking about what dress she was going to wear and how fancy the hotel would be. He smiled and nodded, but his mind was somewhere else. Kept thinking about the piano, about the 200 people who'd be watching, about all the things that could go wrong at work that day. He could not concentrate on anything. Stared at his computer screen, but the numbers blurred together. His coworkers kept stopping by to wish him luck. Some of them made jokes about how they expected a standing ovation. Others told him not to be nervous because he was going to be amazing. He thanked them all, and tried to seem calm, but inside he was falling apart. Every hour that passed brought him closer to the moment he feared most. By late afternoon, his hands were trembling. He noticed it when he tried to type an email. His fingers shook so badly he had to stop and take a deep breath. He told himself it was just adrenaline, just his body preparing for something big, but deep down he knew it was pure terror. When the workday ended, he drove home in silence. No music on the radio, no podcasts or audiobooks. Just the quiet hum of the engine and the pounding of his heart. He picked up his daughter and helped her get ready. She had chosen a light blue dress with little flowers on it, her favorite one. She twirled in front of the mirror and asked if she looked like a princess. He told her she looked like the most beautiful princess in the whole kingdom. She giggled and threw her arms around him. For a moment the fear melted away. He held her tight and reminded himself why he was doing this. Then he got dressed in his one good suit, a dark navy blue that he only wore for weddings and funerals. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked older somehow, tired and nervous and completely out of his depth. His sister arrived right on time. She gave him a hug and told him everything was going to be fine. She promised to take good care of his daughter and find a seat where they could see the stage. He thanked her and kissed his little girl on the forehead. Then he drove to the hotel alone. The venue was a grand place in the center of the city, tall pillars and marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled like stars. He had never been anywhere this fancy in his life. He felt out of place the moment he walked through the doors. People in expensive suits and elegant dresses moved through the lobby, laughing and talking and holding glasses of champagne. He recognized some faces from work executives he had only seen in company emails, clients whose accounts he had handled but never met in person. They all looked so confident and comfortable, like they belonged in a place like this. He did not feel like he belonged at all. He found the event coordinator near the entrance to the field ballroom. She was a tall woman with a clipboard and a headset. When she saw him, her face lit up with relief. "There you are," she said, grabbing his arm gently. "I was starting to worry you might not show up." He forced a smile. "I thought about it." She laughed like he was joking. "Come on, let me show you where you will be playing." She led him through the ballroom, and his breath caught in his throat. The room was enormous. Round tables covered in white cloth filled the space, each one decorated with flowers and candles and sparkling silverware. At the front of the room was a small stage, and on that stage sat the most beautiful piano he had ever seen. It was a full grand piano, black and shiny and polished to perfection, nothing like the little electronic keyboard he practiced on at home. He walked toward it slowly. His legs felt weak beneath him. The coordinator was saying something about the schedule and when he would be called up, but he was not listening. He could only stare at that piano. It looked like something from a concert hall, something meant for real musicians, not for self-taught beginners who learn from videos on the internet. He reached out and touched the lid with his fingertips. The surface was cool and smooth. He lifted it gently and looked at the keys. They were real ivory, weighted and responsive in a way his keyboard could never match. For a moment he felt a flicker of excitement beneath the fear. This was the kind of instrument he had always dreamed of playing, but the excitement faded quickly, replaced by the cold realization that in just a few hours he would have to sit here and perform in front of everyone. The coordinator touched his shoulder and handed him a schedule. "You are on right after the opening speeches," she said, "probably around 8:30. Take some time to get comfortable with the piano if you want." He nodded and thanked her. Then she disappeared into the crowd, leaving him alone with the instrument. He sat down on the bench and placed his fingers on the keys. He pressed a few notes softly. Sound was rich and full, unlike anything he had ever heard from his practice sessions at home. This piano could make even simple notes sound beautiful, but that only made him more afraid. What if he could not do it justice? What if the gap between his skill and this instrument was too wide to bridge. He played the opening bars of his chosen piece, just to see how it felt. His fingers moved hesitantly, at first unsure of the weight and response of the keys. But after a few measures, he started to adjust. Piano was different, but it was still a piano. The notes were the same. The music was the same. He took a deep breath and played a bit more. Then he stopped. He could not practice here. People were starting to fill the room. Did not want anyone to hear him warming up and making mistakes. He stood and walked backstage to a small waiting area. There was a chair and a table with bottles of water. He sat down and tried to calm his nerves. Phone buzzed. A message from his sister. She and his daughter had arrived and found their table. She sent a picture of his little girl smiling and waving at the camera. He stared at the photo for a long time. That smile was everything. It was the reason he had pushed through 3 weeks of fear. It was the reason he was sitting here now instead of hiding at home. He closed his eyes and thought about all the nights he spent practicing, all the songs he learned, all the mistakes he made and fixed and made again. Thought about the first time he played a full piece without stopping. The joy he felt when the final note rang out and he realized he had done. I thought about his daughter listening through the crack in her door, falling asleep to the sound of his music. He was not a professional. He was not a prodigy. He was just a father who wanted to create something beautiful for his child, and tonight he was going to try. Even if his hands shook, even if his voice trembled, even if his heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst, he was going to walk out on that stage and sit at that piano and play, not because he was ready, but because she was watching. The coordinator appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes, she said. He stood up and straightened his jacket. His legs felt like they were made of water. His mouth was dry and his palms were sweating, but he walked toward the stage anyway, one step at a time. The host was at the microphone, giving a short introduction. He could hear the words, but they sounded distant and muffled, like they were coming from underwater. Then he heard his name. Well, not his name exactly, just a description, one of our very own from the finance department, a hidden talent who is here to share something special with us tonight. The room erupted in polite applause. He stepped out from behind the curtain. The lights were bright, and the faces in the crowd were just shadows. He walked to the piano and sat down. On the bench, his hands hovered over the keys, and for one terrifying moment his mind went completely blank. His mind was empty, completely and utterly empty. Sat frozen on that bench with his fingers hovering above the keys. The audience was silent too. 100 people waiting for something to happen. But nothing came. No music, no movement. Just the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Seconds passed that felt like hours. He could feel the heat of the stage lights on his face. He could sense the confusion starting to ripple through the crowd. Someone coughed, a chair creaked, and still he sat there paralyzed by fear. His brain was screaming at him to do something, anything, but his body would not respond. It was like being trapped in a nightmare, where you try to run but your legs refuse to move. He thought about standing up and walking off the stage. He thought about apologizing into the microphone and admitting he had made a terrible mistake. Thought about all the whispers that would follow him through the office for months. The quiet guy who froze in front of everyone. One who could not handle the pressure. His chest tightened and his breathing became shallow. This was it. This was the disaster he had feared since the moment his name was added to the program. But then something unexpected happened. A sound cut through the silence. A small voice from somewhere in the back of the room. It was faint, but he heard it clearly. You can do it. Daddy, his daughter, his little girl sitting at a table in the back with his sister. She had called out to him when no one else knew what to say. The sound of her voice hit him like a wave of warm water. Suddenly, he was not in a hotel ballroom anymore. He was back home, sitting at his keyboard in the corner of the living room late at night when the world was quiet and still. He thought about all those hours spent teaching himself how to play, all the times he wanted to give up but kept going, all the songs he learned note by note, measure by measure. He thought about his daughter lying in her bed with the door cracked open, listening to him play without him ever knowing, falling asleep to the sound of his music. This was for her. It had always been for her. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched, and something inside him shifted. He stopped thinking about the audience. He stopped worrying about making mistakes. Stopped caring about what anyone in that room might think of him. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the little girl in the blue dress who believed in him. He placed his fingers gently on the keys, and he began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost a whisper. They floated into the air like the first drops of rain before a storm. Was playing the piece he had chosen weeks ago, a beautiful slow melody that had always felt like it was written just for him. The kind of music that told a story without any words. At first his fingers moved carefully, feeling their way across the keys, like they were meeting an old friend for the first time in years. But with each passing measure, he grew more confident. Grand piano responded to his touch in ways his little keyboard never could. The sound was rich and deep. It filled the entire ballroom and wrapped around everyone. And Ith closed his eyes, and suddenly he was not performing anymore. He was just playing, the way he did at midnight in his living room, the way he did when no one was watching. The music poured out of him like water from a broken dam. Every emotion he had been holding back for weeks came rushing to the surface. The fear and the doubt and the sleepless nights. Love he had for his daughter and the desire to make her proud. The loneliness of being a single father. And the joy of having her in his life. All of it flowed through his fingers and into the keys. Was not thinking about technique or timing or hitting the right notes. He was just feeling, letting the music carry him wherever it wanted to go. The melody rose and fell like waves on an ocean, sometimes soft and gentle, sometimes powerful and full of longing. He added small touches he had never planned, little flourishes that came from somewhere deep inside, things he did not even know he was capable of. It was like the piano was playing him instead of the other way around. The audience had disappeared, the stage lights had faded. There was nothing left but him and the music and the memory of his daughter asking if he could play like the father in that movie. This was his answer, 2 years in the making, a modest attempt that had somehow become something more. He reached the middle section of the piece, the part that always gave him the most trouble during practice. His fingers hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but then they found their way gliding over the keys with a grace he did not know he possessed. Thought about all the times he had played this section wrong, all the frustration and self-doubt, and now here he was playing it better than he ever had before, not because he had suddenly become more skilled, but because he had finally let go of the fear. The music swelled as he moved into the final movement. This was the part he loved most, the part that always made his chest ache with emotion. Notes climbed higher and higher, building towards something beautiful and inevitable. He could feel tears forming behind his closed eyes, but he did not stop. He let them come. He let everything come, all the years of playing in secret, all the nights of wondering if he was good enough, all the love he had poured into this one simple dream. It was all here in this moment, in this room, in this song. His fingers struck the final chord, a deep resonant sound that hung in the air like the last breath of a prayer. He held the keys down and let the notes fade slowly. Then he lifted his hands and placed them in his lap. The ballroom was silent, completely and utterly silent. He opened his eyes and looked out at the crowd. For a moment, he could not read their faces. They were just shapes in the dim light beyond the stage. His heart was still pounding. His hands were trembling. Did not know if what he had just done was good or terrible or somewhere in between. All he knew was that he had given everything he had. Every ounce of fear and hope and love. He had left it all on that piano bench, and now it was over. He sat there waiting for something to happen, a reaction, a sound, anything but the silence. Stretched on 1 second 3. He felt a flicker of doubt creep back into his chest. Maybe it was not as good as he thought. Maybe the audience was sitting there, unsure how to respond. Maybe they were disappointed or confused or just being polite. He took a breath and prepared to stand up to bow and walk off the stage and disappear into the crowd. But before he could move, he heard something, a single pair of hands clapping, then another and another. The applause started slowly at the back of the room like a spark catching fire. Then it spread, moving forward through the tables like a wave, growing louder with each passing second. He watched in disbelief as people began to rise from their chairs, first one table, then two, then the entire room, 200 people standing on their feet, clapping and cheering for him. 4. The quiet accountant who had never performed in his life. For the self-taught pianist who learned from videos on the internet. For the father who just wanted to play something beautiful for his daughter. He stood up slowly, his legs shaking beneath him. Did not know what to do with his hands. He did not know where to look, so he just stood there, taking it in, letting the sound wash over him like a wave he never expected to feel. And somewhere in the back of the room, he saw a little girl in a blue dress standing on her chair, clapping harder than anyone, her face beaming with a joy that made everything worth it. Done it not perfectly, not like a professional, but in his own way, in his own voice. He had done something he never thought possible, and it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. The applause kept going. It rolled through the ballroom like thunder that refused to fade. He stood beside the piano, not knowing what to do with himself. His whole body was shaking, not from fear this time, but from something he could not name, something that felt like relief and joy and disbelief all mixed together. He bowed awkwardly, the kind bow a person does when they have never bowed in front of a crowd before. It was clumsy and uncertain, but no one seemed to mind. They just kept clapping. Some people were smiling, others were wiping their eyes. He saw his boss near the front of the room. She had her hand pressed over her heart and tears streaming down her face. The woman who ran the events team was standing by the side of the stage, her clipboard forgotten at her side. She was clapping too. Everyone was clapping for him, the quiet guy from finance who never wanted to be noticed. He stepped away from the piano and walked toward the edge of the stages. Legs still felt unsteady beneath him, like he had just run a marathon and his muscles had not caught up yet. As he reached the stairs, a man in an expensive suit stopped him, one of the executives. Someone he had only seen in company-wide emails and never spoken to in person. The man shook his hand firmly and said something about how incredible that was. He thanked him, but the words felt distant, like they were coming from someone else. More people approached, co-workers he barely knew, clients he had never met. They all wanted to shake his hand and tell him how moved they were. He smiled and nodded and thanked each one of them, but his eyes kept scanning the room, looking for the one person who mattered most. Then he saw his daughter was pushing through the crowd, weaving between adults in fancy clothes, her blue dress swishing around her knees as she ran. When she reached him, she threw her arms around his waist and held on tight. He dropped to his knees so he could hold her properly. She buried her face in his shoulder, and he could feel her small body trembling. At first he thought she was crying, but when she pulled back, he saw that she was laughing and crying at the same time. The way people do when they feel too much to contain you. "Did it," she said. Her voice was high and breathless. "You really did it, Daddy." He pulled her close again and pressed his cheek against the top of her head. He could smell the strawberry shampoo she liked, the one she always begged him to buy at the store. For a moment, the rest of the world disappeared. There was no ballroom, no crowd, no applause, just the two of them, a father and his daughter, holding on to each other in the middle of something extraordinary. His sister appeared beside them. She was crying too, full-on tears running down her cheeks. She wrapped her arms around both of them and squeezed tight. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I had no idea you could do something like that." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep in your chest. "I did not know either," he admitted. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People kept coming up to him all night asking how long he had been playing, where he studied, who his teacher was. He told them the truth every time, that he had taught himself, that he learned from videos online, that he had never played for anyone before tonight. Most of them did not believe him at first. They thought he was being modest, but when they realized he was serious, their admiration only grew. A woman from the marketing department told him she had cried the whole way through. A man from accounting said he had given him chills. Someone else said it was the most beautiful thing they had ever heard at a company event. He thanked them all, but inside he still could not quite believe what had happened. The night ended late. He drove home with his daughter asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window, her blue dress wrinkled from all the hugging and dancing she had done. Glanced at her in the rearview mirror and felt his heart swell. This was why he did it. Not for the applause, not for the recognition, but for her, to show her that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that fear does not have to be the end of the story, that sometimes the most beautiful moments come from the places we least expect. When they got home, he carried her inside and tucked her into bed. She stirred just long enough to mumble something about being proud of him. Then she was asleep again, peaceful and safe and dreaming of who knows what. He stood in her doorway for a long time, just watching her breathe, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 2 years ago, he did not know how to play a single note. He had no musical background, no training, no reason to believe he could ever sit at a piano and make something beautiful. But he tried anyway because of her, because she asked him a simple question one night while watching a movie, and that question changed everything. He walked to the living room and sat down at his keyboard. The same little electronic keyboard that had been his teacher and companion for 2 years. It looked so small, now so ordinary compared to the grand piano he had played tonight. But it did not matter. This was where it all started. This was where he found something he never knew he was missing. He placed his fingers on the keys and played a few soft notes. Not the piece from the gala, just a simple melody, something gentle and quiet. The kind of music that felt like a lullaby. As he played, he thought about what would come next. He knew things would be different now. People at work would see him differently. They would remember the night the quiet accountant made an entire room cry, but more than that, he would see himself differently. For so long he had believed he was not good enough, not talented enough, not brave enough. He had hidden his music away like something to be ashamed of. But tonight he learned that the things we hide are often the things that matter most. Parts of ourselves we are afraid to show are usually the parts that connect us to others. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage. It is standing up in front of 200 strangers and saying, "This is who I am, this is what I love, and I am not going to be afraid of it anymore." He finished playing and sat in the silence of his living room. The clock on the wall showed it was well past midnight, but he did not feel tired. He felt alive, more alive than he had felt in years, in the weeks that followed. Everything changed. His coworkers started talking to him more, asking about his music, wanting to know what he was working on next. Events team invited him to play at the next company gathering. He said yes without hesitation. His daughter started sitting beside him when he practiced, not listening through a cracked door anymore, but right there next to him on the bench. Sometimes she would ask him to teach her a song, simple things at first, just a few notes here and there, but it was enough to share something he loved with the person he loved most. He even started playing for others outside of work at a small coffee shop that hosted open mic nights, at a fundraiser for his daughter's school, at a birthday party for a friend who asked if he could play something soft during dinner. Each time was a little easier than the last. The fear never went away completely, but it became something he could manage, something he could push through, because he knew now that the fear was never the point. The point was the music, the connection, the love. Years later, when his daughter was older, she would tell people the story about the night her father played piano at a company gala. about how he had taught himself in secret and never performed before, about how he froze on stage and almost walked away, and about how a little girl in a blue dress called out from the back of the room, "You can do it, Daddy." She would tell them how that moment changed everything, how her father went from being invisible to being unforgettable, how he showed her that it is never too late to chase a dream, how the most ordinary people can create the most extraordinary moments when they are brave enough to try that. Night at the gala was not the end of his story. It was the beginning, a modest attempt at the keys that became something no one expected. Not a perfect performance, not a flawless display of talent, but something far more powerful, a father's love turned into music, and a room full of strangers who will never forget the night they heard it.